Okay, so you've owned your machine for a couple of months now and you've put a fair bit of work into it and getting it to where it is today. And one of the key things that we always get asked, and more often than not we'll supply a service contract for newly installed machines or purchased machines, is how often should your machine be serviced? There is a law or a rule of thumb for generator operation, and it is that every 500 hours it is inspected or completed, or has a service completed on it. And one of the key factors of this is making sure that the engine oil is clean during a service change, changing the oil and fuel filters, and also checking that the air filter isn't restricted and affecting the engine's performance. There are a lot of key elements during a service that are also checked, and it's vital to ensure that these are done to make sure the machine isn't developing any issues and potentially developing anything that may cost you downtime. One of the key things to maintain with the machine is safe and efficient volume of airflow. So this machine is designed to pull cold air in at one end, circulate it over the hot components of the engine, which is the exhaust manifold, the engine body itself, and also the alternator. If you're pulling a lot of load, will generate some heat, and it is then designed to exhaust it out of the back via an air outlet and then up into the atmosphere. More often than not, if it's operating in a dusty environment, the generator radiator will become contaminated and it will cause an over temperature issue with the engine, which will in turn cause the panel to shut it down, and then that will need to be rectified. That can be done in one or two ways. It can either be cleaned out in the machine, or if it's heavily contaminated, sometimes it has to be removed to be chemically cleaned in a bath that's located off-site. Now, another thing to make sure is ensure that the air outlet at the top of the generator is not affected or not blocked, and not being affected by any loose leaves or anything that could cause an airflow restriction to the machine, which could cause an overheating event. The other things to check is the condition of the drive belts. Now, the belts are responsible for driving the charge alternator, which maintains the battery voltage and stability within the generator's control system, and also for driving the cooling fan. Now, if a belt is worn or loose or affecting the drive speed of the fan, that can also cause the engine to overheat. So there are a number of things or elements to check during a generator operation if you're experiencing an overheating event. One of the other things to check as well, although this is a little bit more technical for those of you that understand diesel engines and petrol engines, you'll know there's something called a thermostat located within the engine. The thermostat is responsible for regulating the engine's body temperature. Now, located within the engine structure itself, you have what's called jacket water. The jacket water is responsible for taking the heat away from the engine cylinders and keeping the majority of the engine structure cold or within a safe operating temperature. Cold's the wrong word really, but it does maintain between 18 and 19 degrees during operation at full load or at idle. When the machine is at idle and not pulling no load, the thermostat stays closed, and the reason for this is it allows the engine body to get up to temperature, a safe working temperature of the engine, and the temperature that all the components are happy at, before the thermostat actually activates and then allows the water to circulate through the radiator, where the mechanical fan is taking cold air over it and taking the heat to atmosphere, causing a convection effect. So then the hot water that is trapped within the engine body, once the thermostat activates, circulates through the radiator, comes back into the engine between 10 to 15 degrees cooler, and that is a continuous cycle once the thermostat is activated at between 70 and 80 degrees. However, the point I was trying to make is if you're experiencing an overheating event, normally this happens on older machines that haven't been regularly serviced or maintained by a professional. The thermostat can become stuck shut. Now, what will that cause? All it will cause is at idle, when the engine fires up, is for it to reach its operating temperature at 80 degrees and instantly shut down. If you're experiencing that, one thing to do, or the way to check this, is using a thermal imaging camera. Now, I'm not going to try and show you where the thermostat is because it is located in that many different places on that many different engines and manufacturers. It's not always straightforward to find, but what you will find, a common denominator in this process is, it is normally the top hose that feeds the radiator where the thermostat will be located. However, I have seen them in all weird and wonderful places, so I'm not going to try and show you that right now. There are other things that you need to always check for. You need to check for loose hoses. So sometimes the pipes that bring fluid out of the engine, especially to the engine external heaters, these can become worn or damaged over time because of the heat, the damage it does to the hoses. They need to be inspected, and also keeping a general eye on the general condition of the generator. Now, if it's operating in a clean atmosphere, you won't have any issues, but if it's operating in an area where there's dust and contamination within the air, one thing you will notice, as well as radiator contamination, is your air filter may become blocked. Now, if your generator starts to smoke heavily under load, or more often than normal, one of the things to do is to either look at the back of the air filter housing where you've got what's called an air filter restriction indicator. Now, if the air filter becomes blocked and it's causing a vacuum during operation and the turbo is struggling to pull clean air into the engine, that air filter restriction indicator will activate. And what does this mean? If it activates, it goes from being clear, see-through, to either red or yellow. Yellow normally when it's struggling, and then red once it's completely blocked. And as a result, the engine is struggling to pull clean air in via the turbo. It is then time to either change or clean your air filter, depending if you have one available. Alternatively, you remove it and you clean it. But if it's being serviced and maintained on a regular basis, it's important to ensure your air filters are being changed. So moving on from your air filter and your general condition of your generator, you need to make sure that your fluids are being changed on a regular basis. Rule of thumb is every 3 years you change the coolant, but as a precaution, you always check the glycol levels during an interim service. Glycol is the fluid and the chemical that is suspended within the coolant that prevents the water from freezing. Now, why is this important? If you just fill your engine up with water and it experiences a cold event such as -5 or -1 at night time, the engine water will actually freeze, and what happens when water freezes is it expands. Now, I'm not saying it would, I'm not saying it has, but it has the potential to crack the engine components, and that's not something anybody wants. So that's why we run a glycol within the coolant system, and also glycol is responsible for creating the heat transfer efficiency and increasing it within the suspended fluid that operates within the coolant system. So it plays two vital roles in preventing it from freezing during cold nights, and also allowing the heat transfer efficiency to be increased during operation. So other than that, and ensuring that your engine filters, fluids and various other bits and pieces are checked on a regular basis, it's very important to just keep your eye generally on the condition of the generator. You will know yourself as an operator if something becomes wrong, or if something's loose, or a noise has changed, or there's a new rattle. Sometimes you'll find guards will become loose, or you'll find a hose is where it's been clipped, it starts to rub through. And if you can change these things before it becomes an issue, obviously you'll save yourself the cost of a breakdown. And in general, that's it really. We've covered pretty much everything. There is a lot more technical stuff that we could go into with the control panels, but that tends to be something that we'd carry out for you as an installer or a supplier, and run you through the more technical operations and capabilities of the control system should you be looking to do something a little bit different other than just starting and stopping it on a regular day-to-day basis. As a rule of thumb, it's pretty good if it's a standby generator that you start and stop it once a week and make sure it'll start, because sometimes what can happen is the battery charger can fail, and as a result it won't start when you come to it. And also ensuring that your emergency stop circuits and your breaker is in the on position in a standby application. But if it's in a prime application, and as I mentioned earlier on in the video, and you've lost a generator output and the generator is still running, it is 9 times out of 10 this breaker's in the off position because something's happened further down the line that the generator is supplying. Simply just pop it back in and you'll restore power to the supply. But if you do try to turn this on and it just drops straight into the trip position, it means something is wrong between where the cable terminates at this breaker and where it supplies the load. And that's it really.